This is Audible. Audio Renaissance presents The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Brandon, read by the author.
Hello. My purpose in this program is to identify the most important factors on which self-esteem depends. If self-esteem is the health of the mind, then few subjects are of comparable urgency. The turbulence of our times demands strong selves with a clear sense of identity, competence, and worth. With a breakdown of cultural consensus, an absence of worthy role models, little in the public arena to inspire our allegiance, and disorientingly rapid change a permanent feature of our lives, with all that, it is a dangerous moment in history not to know who we are or not to trust ourselves. The stability we cannot find in the world, we must create within our own persons. To face life with low self-esteem is to be at a severe disadvantage. These considerations are part of my motivation in writing this program, which in essence consists of my answers to 4 questions. What is self-esteem? Why is self-esteem important? What can we do to raise the level of our self-esteem? What role do others play in influencing our self-esteem? Self-esteem is shaped by both internal and external factors. By internal, I mean factors residing within or generated by the individual, ideas or beliefs, practices or behaviors. By external, I mean factors in the environment, such as messages verbally or non-verbally transmitted, or experiences evoked by parents, teachers, significant others, organizations, and culture. I examine self-esteem from the inside and the outside. What is the contribution of the individual to his or her self-esteem, and what is the contribution of other people? I first lectured on self-esteem and its impact on love, work, and the struggle for happiness in the late 1950s, and published my first articles on the subject in the 1960s. The challenge then was to gain public understanding of its importance. Self-esteem was not yet an expression in widespread use. Today, the danger may be that the idea has become fashionable. It is on everyone's tongue, which is not to say that it is better understood. Yet if we are unclear about its precise meaning and about the specific factors its successful attainment depends on, if we are careless in our thinking, or succumb to the oversimplifications and sugar-coatings of pop psychology, then the subject will suffer a fate worse than being ignored. It will become trivialized.
Gain the lead.
In working with self-esteem, we need to be aware of 2 dangers. One is that of oversimplifying what healthy self-esteem requires, and thereby of catering to people's hunger for quick fixes and effortless solutions. The other is that of surrendering to a kind of fatalism or determinism that assumes in effect that individuals either have good self-esteem or they haven't. In other words, everyone's destiny is set by the first few years of life, and there's not much to be done about it, except perhaps years of psychotherapy. Both views encourage passivity. Both obstruct our vision of what is possible. My experience is that most people underestimate their power to change and grow. They believe implicitly that yesterday's pattern must be tomorrow's. They do not see that choices do exist. They rarely appreciate how much they can do on their own behalf if genuine growth and higher self-esteem are their goals, and if they are willing to take responsibility for their own lives. The belief that they are powerless becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This program ultimately is a call to action. It is addressed to all men and women who wish to participate actively in the process of their evolution, as well as to psychologists, parents, teachers, and those responsible for the culture of organizations. This program is about what is possible. There are realities we cannot avoid. One of them is the importance of self-esteem. Regardless of what we do or do not admit, we cannot be indifferent to our self-evaluation. However, we can run from this knowledge if it makes us uncomfortable. We can shrug it off, evade it, declare that we are only interested in practical matters, and escape into baseball or the evening news or the financial pages or a shopping spree or a sexual adventure or a drink. Yet, self-esteem is a fundamental human need. Its impact requires neither our understanding nor our consent. It works its way within us, with or without our knowledge. We are free to seek to grasp the dynamics of self-esteem or to remain unconscious of them. But in the latter case, we remain a mystery to ourselves and endure the consequences.
Set, start.
Let us
Tough
look
luck
at the role
on.
of self-esteem in our lives. By self-esteem, I mean much more than that innate sense of self-worth that presumably is our human birthright. That spark that psychotherapists and teachers seek to fan in those they work with. That spark is only the anteroom to self-esteem. Self-esteem, fully realized, is the experience that we are appropriate to life and to the requirements of life. More specifically, self-esteem is confidence in our ability to think, confidence in our ability to cope with the basic challenges of life, and confidence in our right to be successful and happy. The feeling of being worthy, deserving, entitled to assert our needs and wants, achieve our values, and enjoy the fruits of our efforts. To trust one's mind and to know that one is worthy of happiness is the essence of self-esteem. The power of this conviction about oneself lies in the fact that it is more than a judgment or a feeling. It is a motivator. It inspires behavior. In turn, it is directly affected by how we act. Causation flows in both directions. There is a continuous feedback loop between our actions in the world and our self-esteem. If I trust my mind and judgment, I am more likely to operate as a thinking being. Bringing appropriate awareness to my activities, my life works better. This reinforces trust in my mind. If I distrust my mind, I am more likely to be mentally passive. When my actions lead to disappointing or painful results, I feel justified in distrusting my mind. With high self-esteem, I am more likely to persist in the face of difficulties. With low self-esteem, I am more likely to give up or go through the motions of trying without really giving my best. If I persevere, the likelihood is that I will succeed more often than I fail. If I don't, the likelihood is that I will fail more often than I succeed. Either way, my view of myself will be reinforced. If I respect myself and require that others deal with me respectfully, I send out signals and behave in ways that increase the likelihood that others will respond appropriately. When they do, I am reinforced and confirmed in my initial belief. If I lack self-respect and accept discourtesy, abuse, or exploitation from others as natural, I unconsciously transmit this, and some people will treat me at my self-estimate. When this happens, and I submit to it, my self-respect deteriorates still more. The value of self-esteem lies not merely in the fact that it allows us to feel better, but that it allows us to live better, to respond to challenges and opportunities more resourcefully and more appropriately. The level of our self-esteem has profound consequences for every aspect of our existence. How we operate in the workplace, how we deal with people, how high we are likely to rise, how much we are likely to achieve. In the personal realm, it helps determine with whom we are likely to fall in love, how we interact with our spouse, children, and friends, and what level of personal happiness we attain. There are positive correlations between healthy self-esteem and a variety of other traits that bear directly on our capacity for achievement and for happiness. Healthy self-esteem correlates with rationality, realism, intuitiveness, creativity, independence, flexibility, ability to manage change, willingness to admit and correct mistakes, benevolence, and cooperativeness. Poor self-esteem correlates with irrationality, blindness to reality, rigidity, fear of the new and unfamiliar, inappropriate conformity or inappropriate rebelliousness, defensiveness, over-compliant or over-controlling behavior, and fear of or hostility toward other people. High self-esteem seeks the challenge and stimulation of worthwhile and demanding goals. Low self-esteem seeks the safety of the familiar and undemanding.
Reinforcement.
The more solid our self-esteem, the better equipped we are to cope with troubles that arise in our personal lives or in our careers. And the quicker we are to pick ourselves up after a fall, the more energy we have to begin anew. The higher our self-esteem, the more ambitious we tend to be. Not necessarily in a career or financial sense, but in terms of what we hope to experience in life, emotionally, intellectually, creatively, spiritually. The lower our self-esteem, the less we aspire to, and the less we are likely to achieve. Either path tends to be self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating. The higher our self-esteem, the stronger the drive to express ourselves, reflecting the sense of richness within. The lower our self-esteem, the more urgent the need to quote-unquote prove ourselves, or to forget ourselves by living mechanically and unconsciously. The higher our self-esteem, the more open, honest, and appropriate our communications are likely to be, because we believe our thoughts have value and therefore we welcome rather than fear clarity. The lower our self-esteem, the more muddy, evasive, and inappropriate our communications are likely to be because of uncertainty about our own thoughts and feelings and our anxiety about the listener's response. The healthier our self-esteem, the more inclined we are to treat others with respect, benevolence, goodwill, and fairness, since we do not tend to perceive them as a threat, and since self-respect is the foundation of respect for others. We tend to feel most comfortable, most at home, with persons whose self-esteem level resembles our own. Opposites may attract about some issues, but not this one. High self-esteem individuals tend to be drawn to high self-esteem individuals. We do not see a passionate love affair, for example, between persons at opposite ends of the self-esteem continuum, just as we are not likely to see a passionate romance between intelligence and stupidity. Note that I am speaking of passionate love, not a brief infatuation or sexual episode which can operate by a different set of dynamics. Medium self-esteem individuals are typically attracted to medium self-esteem individuals. Low self-esteem seeks low self-esteem in others. Not consciously, of course, but by the logic of that which leads us to feel we have encountered a soul. The most disastrous relationships are those between persons who think poorly of themselves. The union of two abysses does not produce height. It is not difficult to see the importance of self-esteem to success in the arena of intimate relationships. There is no greater barrier to romantic happiness than the fear that I am undeserving of love and that my destiny is to be hurt. Such fears give birth to self-fulfilling prophecies. If I enjoy a fundamental sense of efficacy and worth and experience myself as lovable, then I have a foundation for appreciating and loving others. I have something to give. I am not trapped in feelings of deficiency. But if I lack respect and enjoyment of who I am, I have very little to give except my unfilled need. In my emotional impoverishment, I tend to see other people essentially as sources of approval or disapproval. I do not appreciate them for who they are in their own right. I see only what they can or cannot do for me. I am not looking for people whom I can admire and with whom I can share the excitement and adventure of life. I'm looking for people who will not condemn me, and perhaps will be impressed by my persona, the face I present to the world. My ability to love remains undeveloped. We have all heard the observation that if you do not love yourself, you will be unable to love others. Less well understood is the other half of the story. If I do not feel lovable, it is very difficult to believe that anyone else loves me. If I do not accept myself, how can I accept your love for me? Your warmth and devotion are confusing. They confound my self-concept, since I know I am not lovable. Thus, even if I consciously disown my feelings of being unlovable, even if I insist or try to insist that I am wonderful, my poor self-concept remains deep within to undermine my attempts at relationships. Unwittingly, I become a saboteur of love. I attempt love, but the foundation of inner security is not there. Instead, there is the secret fear that I am destined only for pain. So I pick someone who inevitably will reject or abandon me. Or, if I pick someone with whom happiness might be possible, I subvert the relationship by demanding excessive reassurances, or by venting irrational possessiveness, or by making catastrophes of small frictions, or by seeking control through subservience or domination, by finding ways to reject my partner before my partner can reject me. Everyone knows the famous Groucho Marx joke that he would never join a club that would have him for a member. That is exactly the idea by which some low self-esteem people operate their love life. If you love me, you obviously are not good enough for me. Only someone who will reject me is an acceptable object of my devotion. Note that it is not always necessary to destroy the relationship entirely. It may be acceptable that the relationship continue, providing I am not happy. I may engage in a project called struggling to be happy, or working on our relationship. I may read books on the subject, participate in seminars, attend lectures, or enter psychotherapy with the announced aim of being happy in the future. But not now. Not today. The possibility of happiness in the present is too terrifyingly immediate.
Tough luck and catch.
Happiness anxiety, as I call it, is very common.
Start.
Happiness can activate internal voices saying, I don't deserve this, or it will never last, or I'm riding for a fall, or I'm killing my mother or father by being happier than they ever were, or happiness is only an illusion, or nobody else is happy, so why should I be? What is required for many of us is the courage to tolerate happiness without self-sabotage, until such time as we lose the fear of it and realize that it will not destroy us and it need not disappear. One day at a time, I will tell clients, see if you can get through today without doing anything to undermine or subvert your good feelings. And if you fall off the wagon, don't despair. Pull yourself back up and recommit yourself to happiness. Such perseverance is self-esteem building. Self-esteem creates a set of implicit expectations about what is possible and appropriate to us. These expectations tend to generate the actions that turn them into realities, and the realities confirm and strengthen the original beliefs. Self-esteem, high or low, tends to be a generator of self-fulfilling prophecies. Self-concept is destiny, or more precisely, it tends to be. Our self-concept is who and what we consciously and subconsciously think we are. Our physical and psychological traits, our assets and liabilities, possibilities and limitations, strengths and weaknesses. A self-concept includes our level of self-esteem, but is more global. We cannot understand a person's behavior without understanding the self-concept behind it. People sabotage themselves at the height of their success all the time. They do so when success clashes with their implicit beliefs about what is appropriate to them. It is frightening to be flung beyond the limits of one's idea of who one is. If a self-concept cannot accommodate a given level of success, and if the self-concept does not change, it is predictable that the person will find ways to self-sabotage. Poor self-esteem places us in an adversarial relationship to our well-being. The question is sometimes asked, is it possible to have too much self-esteem? No, it is not, no more than it is possible to have too much physical health or too powerful an immune system. Sometimes self-esteem is confused with boasting or bragging or arrogance, but such traits reflect not too much self-esteem, but too little. They reflect a lack of self-esteem. Persons of high self-esteem are not driven to make themselves superior to others. They do not seek to prove their value by measuring themselves against a comparative standard. Their joy is in being who they are, not in being better than someone else. I recall reflecting on this issue one day while watching my dog playing in the backyard. She was running about, sniffing flowers, chasing squirrels, leaping into the air, showing a great joy in being. I'm sure she was not thinking that she was more glad to be alive than the dog next door. She was simply delighting in her own existence. That image captures something essential of how I understand the experience of healthy self-esteem. People with troubled self-esteem are often uncomfortable in the presence of those with higher self-esteem. They may feel resentful and declare they have too much self-esteem, but what they are really making is a statement about themselves. The sad truth is, whoever is successful in this world runs the risk of being a target. People of low achievement often envy and resent people of high achievement. Those who are unhappy often envy and resent those who are happy. And those of low self-esteem sometimes like to talk about the danger of having, as they put it, too much self-esteem. A poor self-esteem does not mean that we will necessarily be incapable of achieving any real values. Some of us may have the talent, energy, and drive to achieve a great deal, in spite of feelings of inadequacy or unworthiness. An example is the highly productive workaholic who is driven to prove his worth to, say, a father who predicted he would always be a loser. But a poor self-esteem does mean that we will be less effective and less creative than we have the power to be, and it means that we will be crippled in our ability to find joy in our achievements. Nothing we do will ever feel like enough. If my aim is to prove I am enough, the project goes on to infinity, because the battle was already lost on the day I conceded the issue was debatable. So it is always one more victory, one more promotion, one more sexual conquest, one more company, one more piece of jewelry, a larger house, a more expensive car, another award, yet the void within remains unfilled. In today's culture, some frustrated people who hit this impasse announce that they have decided to pursue a spiritual path and renounce their egos. This enterprise is doomed to failure. An ego, in the mature and healthy sense, is precisely what they have failed to attain. They dream of giving away what they do not possess. No one can successfully bypass the need for self-esteem. A word of caution. If one error is to deny the importance of self-esteem, another is to claim too much for it. In their enthusiasm, some writers today seem to suggest that a healthy sense of self-value is all we need to assure happiness and success. The matter is more complex than that. A well-developed sense of self is a necessary condition of our well-being, but not a sufficient condition. Its presence does not guarantee fulfillment, but its lack guarantees some measure of anxiety, frustration, or despair. Self-esteem is not a substitute for a roof over one's head or food in one's stomach, but it increases the likelihood that one will find a way to meet such needs. Self-esteem is not a substitute for the knowledge and skills one needs to operate effectively in the world, but it increases the likelihood that one will acquire them. The survival value of self-esteem is especially evident today. We have reached a moment in history when self-esteem, which has always been a supremely important psychological need, has also become a supremely important economic need. It is the attribute imperative for adaptiveness to an increasingly complex, challenging, and competitive world. In the past few decades, the United States has shifted from a manufacturing society to an information society. We now live in a global economy characterized by rapid change, accelerating scientific and technological breakthroughs, and an unprecedented level of competitiveness. These developments create demands for higher levels of education and training than were required in previous generations. Everyone acquainted with business culture knows this. What is not understood is that these developments also create new demands on our psychological resources. Specifically, these developments ask for a greater capacity for innovation, self-management, personal responsibility, and self-direction. A modern business can no longer be run by a few people who think and many people who just do what they are told. Today, organizations need not only an unprecedentedly higher level of knowledge and skill among all those who participate, but also a higher level of independence, self-reliance, self-trust, and the capacity to exercise initiative. In a word, self-esteem. The challenge extends further than the world of business. We are freer than any generation before us to choose our own religion, philosophy, or moral code, to adopt our own lifestyle, to select our own criteria for the good life. We no longer have unquestioning faith in tradition. We no longer believe that government will lead us to salvation, nor church, nor labor unions, nor big organizations of any kind. We have more choices and options than ever before in every area. Frontiers of limitless possibilities now face us in whatever direction we look. To be adaptive in such an environment, we have a greater need for personal autonomy. This is because there is no widely accepted code of values and rituals to spare us the challenge of individual decision-making. We must learn to think for ourselves, to cultivate our own resources, and to take responsibility for the choices, values, and actions that shape our lives. The greater the number of choices and decisions we need to make at a conscious level, the more urgent our need for self-esteem. Self-esteem has two interrelated components. One is a sense of basic confidence in the face of life's challenges. This is self-efficacy. The other is a sense of being worthy of happiness. This is self-respect. Self-efficacy means confidence in the functioning of my mind, in my ability to think, understand, learn, choose, and make decisions. It means confidence in my ability to understand the facts of reality that fall within the sphere of my interests and needs. It means self-trust and self-reliance. Self-respect means assurance of my value. It means an affirmative attitude toward my right to live and to be happy. It means comfort in appropriately asserting my thoughts, wants, and needs. It means the feeling that joy and fulfillment are my natural birthright. We will need to consider these two ideas in more detail, but for the moment consider the following. If an individual felt inadequate to face the challenges of life, if an individual lacked fundamental self-trust, confidence in his or her mind, we would recognize a self-esteem deficiency, no matter what other assets he or she possessed. Or, if an individual lacked a basic sense of self-respect, felt unworthy or undeserving of the love or respect of others, unentitled to happiness, fearful of asserting thoughts, wants, or needs, again, we would recognize a self-esteem deficiency, no matter what other positive attributes he or she exhibited. Self-efficacy and self-respect are the dual foundations of healthy self-esteem. Absent either one, self-esteem is impaired. They are the defining characteristics of self-esteem. Within a given person, there will be inevitable fluctuations in self-esteem levels, much as there are fluctuations in all psychological states. We need to think in terms of a person's average level of self-esteem. While we sometimes speak of self-esteem as a conviction about oneself, it is more accurate to speak of it as a disposition to experience oneself a particular way. What way? Let me sum it up in a formal, precise definition. Self-esteem is the disposition to experience oneself as competent to cope with the basic challenges of life and as worthy of happiness. Now, the value of a precise definition is that it allows us to distinguish a particular aspect of reality from all others so that we can think about it and work with it with clarity and focus. If we wish to know what self-esteem depends on, how to nurture it in our children, support it in schools, encourage it in organizations, strengthen it in psychotherapy, or develop it in ourselves, we need to know what precisely we are aiming at. We are unlikely to hit a target we cannot see. If our idea of self-esteem is vague, the means we adopt to build it will reflect this vagueness. Am I suggesting that the definition of self-esteem I offer is written in stone and can never be improved on? Not at all. Definitions are contextual. They relate to a given level of knowledge. As knowledge grows, definitions tend to become more precise. I may find a better, clearer, more exact way to capture the essence of the concept during my lifetime, or perhaps someone else may. But within the context of the knowledge we now possess, I can think of no alternative formulation that identifies with more precision the unique aspect of human experience we are exploring. To have high self-esteem, then, is to feel confidently appropriate to life. To have low self-esteem is to feel inappropriate to life, to feel wrong. Not about this issue or that, but wrong as a person. To have average self-esteem is to fluctuate between feeling appropriate and inappropriate, right and wrong as a person. It is also to manifest these inconsistencies in behavior, sometimes acting wisely, sometimes acting foolishly, thereby reinforcing the uncertainty about who one is at one's core. I have given the name self-efficacy to that experience of basic power or competence that we associate with healthy self-esteem, and self-respect to the experience of dignity and personal worth. While their meaning is clear in a general way, I want to examine them more closely. First, self-efficacy. To be efficacious in the basic dictionary sense is to be capable of producing a desired result. Confidence in our basic efficacy is confidence in our ability to learn what we need to learn and do what we need to do in order to achieve our goals, insofar as success depends on our own efforts. Rationally, we do not judge our competence in the sense meant here by factors outside our control. Self-efficacy is not the conviction that we can never make an error. It is the conviction that we are able to think, to judge, know, and to correct our errors. It is trust in our mental processes and abilities. Self-efficacy is not the certainty that we will be able to master any and every challenge that life presents. It is the conviction that we are capable in principle of learning what we need to learn, and that we are committed to doing our rational and conscientious best to master the tasks and challenges entailed by our values. Self-efficacy is deeper than confidence in our specific knowledge and skills based on past successes and accomplishments, although it is clearly nurtured by them. It is confidence in what made it possible for us to acquire knowledge and skills and to achieve successes. It is confidence in our ability to think, confidence in our consciousness and how we choose to use it. Again, it is trust in our processes, and as a consequence, a disposition to expect success for our efforts. The distinction between trust in our processes and trust in some particular area of knowledge is of the highest importance in virtually every sphere of endeavor. In a world in which the total of human knowledge is doubling about every 10 years, our security can rest only on our ability to learn. No one can expect to be equally competent in all areas, and no one needs to be. Our interests, values, and circumstances determine the areas in which we are likely to concentrate. Now let's consider the second component of self-esteem, self-respect. Just as self-efficacy entails the expectation of success as natural, so self-respect entails the expectation of friendship, love, and happiness as natural, as a result of who we are and what we do. We can isolate the two components conceptually for the sake of analysis, but in the reality of our daily experience, they constantly overlap and involve each other. Self-respect is the conviction of our own value. It is not the delusion that we are perfect or superior to everyone else. It is not comparative or competitive at all. It is the conviction that our life and well-being are worth acting to support, protect, and nurture, that we are good and worthwhile and deserving of the respect of others, and that our happiness and personal fulfillment are important enough to work for. To appreciate why our need for self-respect is so urgent, consider this. To live successfully, we need to pursue and achieve values. To act appropriately, we need to value the beneficiary of our actions. We need to consider ourselves worthy of the rewards of our actions. Absent this conviction, we will not know how to take care of ourselves, protect our legitimate interests, satisfy our needs, or enjoy our own achievements. Thus, our experience of self-efficacy also will be impaired. If we respect ourselves, we tend to act in ways that confirm and reinforce this respect, such as requiring others to deal with us appropriately. If we wish to raise the level of our self-respect, we need to act in ways that will cause it to rise, and this begins with a commitment to the value of our own person. The need to see ourselves as good is the need to experience self-respect. It emerges very early. As we develop from childhood, we progressively become aware of the power to choose our actions. We become aware of our responsibility for the choices we make. We acquire our sense of being a person. We experience a need to feel that we are right as a person, right in our characteristic way of functioning. This is the need to feel that we are good. The level of our self-esteem is not set once and for all in childhood. It can grow as we mature, or it can deteriorate. There are people whose self-esteem was higher at the age of 10 than at the age of 60, and the reverse is also true. Self-esteem can rise and fall and rise again over the course of a lifetime. Mine certainly has. I can think back over my history and observe changes in the level of my self-esteem that reflect choices I made in the face of particular challenges. I can recall instances when I made choices I am proud of and others I bitterly regret. Choices that strengthened my self-esteem and others that lowered it. We all can. With regard to choices that lower self-esteem, I think of times when I was unwilling to see what I saw and know what I knew. Times when I needed to raise awareness and instead I lowered it. Times when I needed to examine my feelings and instead I disowned them. Times when I needed to announce a truth and instead I clung to silence. Times when I needed to walk away from a relationship that was harming me and instead I struggled to preserve it. Times when I needed to stand up for my deepest feelings and assert my deepest needs, and instead I waited for a miracle to deliver me. Any time we have to act, to face a challenge, to make a moral decision, we affect our feelings about ourselves for good or bad, depending on the nature of our response and the mental processes behind it. And if we avoid action and decisions in spite of their obvious necessity, that too affects our sense of self. Our need for self-esteem is the need to know we are functioning as our life and well-being require. What does self-esteem look like? There are some fairly simple and direct ways in which self-esteem manifests itself in ourselves and in others. None of these items taken in isolation is a guarantee, but when all are present together, self-esteem seems certain. Self-esteem expresses itself in a face, manner, and way of talking and moving that projects the pleasure one takes in being alive. It expresses itself in an ease of talking of accomplishments or shortcomings, with directness and honesty, since one is in a friendly relationship to facts. It expresses itself in the comfort one experiences in giving and receiving compliments, expressions of affection, appreciation, and the like. It expresses itself in an openness to criticism and a comfort about acknowledging mistakes, because one's self-esteem is not tied to the image of being perfect. It expresses itself when one's words and movements tend to have a quality of ease and spontaneity, reflecting the fact that one is not at war with oneself. It expresses itself in the harmony between what one says and does and how one looks, sounds, and moves. It expresses itself in an attitude of openness to and curiosity about new ideas, new experiences, new possibilities of life. It expresses itself in the fact that feelings of anxiety or insecurity, if they appear, will be less likely to intimidate or overwhelm, since accepting them, managing them, and rising above them rarely feels impossibly difficult. It expresses itself in the ability to enjoy the humorous aspects of life in oneself and others. It expresses itself in one's flexibility in responding to situations and challenges, since one trusts one's mind and does not see life as doom or defeat. It expresses itself in one's comfort with assertive behavior in oneself and others. It expresses itself in an ability to preserve a quality of harmony and dignity under conditions of stress. Physical manifestations of self-esteem include eyes that are alert, bright, and lively, shoulders that are relaxed yet erect, hands that tend to be relaxed and graceful, arms that tend to hang in an easy, natural way, a posture that tends to be unstrained, erect, well-balanced, a walk that tends to be purposeful, and a voice that tends to be modulated with an intensity appropriate to the situation and with clear pronunciation. Notice that the theme of relaxation occurs again and again. Relaxation implies that we are not hiding from ourselves, not denying our feelings, and are not at war with who we are. Chronic tension conveys some form of internal split, some form of self-avoidance or self-repudiation, some aspect of the self being disowned or held on a very tight leash. When self-esteem is low, we are often manipulated by fear. Fear of reality to which we feel inadequate. Fear of facts about ourselves or others that we have denied, disowned, or repressed.
In the wild.
Fear of the collapse of our pretenses. Fear of exposure. Fear of the humiliation of failure and sometimes the responsibilities of success. We live more to avoid pain than to experience joy. If we feel that crucial aspects of reality with which we must deal are hopelessly close to our understanding, if we face the key problems of life with a basic sense of helplessness,